Hi, I'm Julie Brunner, your instructor. In the first 4 modules, I introduced the basics of resale restricted housing and explained affordable pricing. I showed you how to calculate an initial sales price so that it's affordable to home buyers at various incomes. Then we looked at fixed rate and index-based resale formulas. In this final module, I'll continue with another resale formula commonly used in resale restrictions, the appraisal-based formula. Let's get started.
By the end of this module, you'll be able to create an appraisal-based formula for your program, project the future price based on the appraisal-based formula you crafted, and explain the pros and cons of an appraisal-based resale formula. A few quick reminders. There are 3 basic types of resale formulas used by resale restricted homeownership programs. Fixed-rate formulas, which I discussed in Module 3, index-based formulas, which I discussed in Module 4, and appraisal-based formulas, which I'll discuss now. Our goals for any resale formula are to ensure ongoing affordability to future home buyers and to ensure a fair return on investment to the outgoing homeowner. In Modules 3 and 4, we discussed the fixed rate and index-based formulas, both of which are fairly simple. You take the affordable price the homeowner paid when they purchased their home and you increase it by a fixed multiplier or the percentage change in a published economic index over time to calculate the formula price. The appraisal-based formula takes a different approach. You still begin with the affordable price the homeowner initially paid when they purchased their home, but this time you add to that number a percentage of the increase in appraised market value of the home over time. Our CDC in Coffeetown has chosen the following formula. The original affordable price plus 25% of the increase in value, which is calculated by subtracting the original appraised value from the current appraised value. The most common percentage used is 25% of the increase in appraised value, although programs in hotter markets may use a number as low as 15% and programs in depressed markets may choose a higher percentage. To do the math, let's again revisit the scenario we worked on together in Module 2. As a reminder, we calculated our initial affordable price to be $150,000, and the market value of the home was $250,000. Now let's assume that 10 years have passed and our homeowners want to sell their house. They contact us and want to know how much they can sell their house for. The first step in calculating a homeowner's formula price is to order a market appraisal of their home. Remember, Coffeetown has a robust economy and housing prices have risen significantly over the past 10 years. Like most communities in the U.S., Coffeetown suffered from a significant decline in housing prices during the recession, but prices started heading back up a year or 2 ago, and it's once again a hot market. So in this instance, the home that appraised for $250,000 10 years ago is now appraising at $400,000. Next, we calculate 25% of the increase in value, so we take our new appraised value of $400,000 and we subtract our original appraised value of $250,000 and then multiply that by 25%, which equals $37,500. And finally, we calculate our formula price by simply adding the $37,500 to the original affordable price of $150,000. This results in a formula price of $187,500 and is the maximum price for which our homeowner can sell their home. As we discussed in the previous modules, the formula price sets a cap on the maximum sale price. It's not a guarantee, but unlike the fixed rate and index-based formulas, appraisal-based formulas can have a protection against market downturns built right into the formula. So in addition to stating that the homeowner gets 25% of the increase in value, some programs include language that the homeowner gets 25% of the change in value, so the homeowner shares in the loss as well. So using that 25% of the change in value, if the market fell by $50,000 when the appraisal dropped from $250,000 to $200,000, our homeowner would only be able to sell their house for the original affordable price of $150,000 plus 25% of the change in market value, so our homeowner would have to sell their home for no more than $137,500, or like most homeowners, wait for the market to recover in order to sell without taking a loss. Assuming the program does not address market downturns directly in the formula, appraisal-based formulas offer the same alternatives as fixed-rate and index-based formulas. The first option is the lesser of the formula price or the appraised value, whichever is less. In this case, the program is taking some of the risk if markets fall, but less than fixed-rate or index-based formulas because their values can continue to rise even when markets fall. In this scenario, our home that initially appraised for $250,000 and sold to the eligible buyer for $150,000 is now only worth $200,000. The formula price for that home would be $150,000 plus zero because there was no increase in value, so the homeowner's value did not fall even when market values did. So you can see that the homeowner's investment remained constant in dollars, but grew as a proportion of the total market value, from 60% to 75% when the market price fell from $250,000 to $200,000. The program's original investment, on the other hand, went from $100,000, or 40% of the total market value, down to only $50,000, or 25% of the total market value at resale. So because the homeowner's selling price is flat in a falling market, the program takes a bigger hit than the owner does, but less of a hit than they would if prices had been allowed to increase as it could with the index or fixed rate formulas. Another alternative is to share the loss equally between the program and the homeowner and use this language instead. The formula price shall be equal to the homeowner's original affordable price plus 25% of any increase in the appraised value, or in the case of an appraised value that is decreased, the cap is equal to the homeowner's share of the appraised value. And the homeowner's share is calculated as the ratio of the buyer's original investment to the original market value. In this scenario, the homeowner would be entitled to the lesser of $150,000 or their share of the appraised value. When they bought the home initially, their $150,000 investment represented 60% of the total cost. So their share of the market value is 60% of $200,000 or $120,000. So in this case, the lesser of those two numbers is $120,000 rather than $150,000 of their formula price. In the second scenario, both the program and the homeowner have lost value in their investment. The homeowner's investment has gone from being worth $150,000 when they bought it to $120,000 when they want to sell. Consequently, they either need to stay in their house or wait for the market to recover, or bring money to the table to close, just as a market rate owner would have to do. The program, similarly, initially invested $100,000 of community investment, but that's now only worth $80,000. Both the homeowner and the program lost 20% of their investment when the market fell by 20%. Now we need to evaluate whether or not our formula achieves our goals of maintaining affordability and providing a fair return to the seller. Unlike the index-based formula, the appraisal-based formula has no relationship to incomes, so we should not assume that just because we've limited the resale price that it's adequately affordable to our target market. So we start by comparing this change in the appraisal-based price to historic changes in incomes for the area. Remember in Module 4 we discovered that incomes increased in value 22% over 10 years, which corresponded to a price of $183,000. With the appraisal-based formula, our price is going from $150,000 to $187,500, so we can see that there is some loss of affordability. And if we're choosing a formula in a time when interest rates are at historic lows, we are likely to have trouble finding qualified buyers down the road once interest rates go up. In that case, we can now go back and either consider another formula or reduce the percentage of the increase in value that our sellers are entitled to when they sell. On the other hand, if we're designing our formula at a time of exceptionally high interest rates, we might accept the risk of eroding affordability because falling interest rates down the road are likely to mitigate that risk. Now we need to decide if our formula yields a fair return to the seller. The first two steps in our calculation are exactly the same as we did in the last module. We calculated the outstanding balance of the mortgage that must be repaid, and we found that the homeowner still owes $122,000. Then we estimated seller's closing costs at 5%, or about $9,000. So starting with a formula price of $187,500, we deducted $122,000 for the outstanding mortgage and $9,000 for closing costs, which leaves the sellers with about $56,500 in cash at closing. Is that a fair return when you compare it to the homebuyer's alternative of renting? As with each formula, there are some significant advantages to an appraisal-based formula. One of the biggest advantages to the appraisal-based formula is that it can fully protect the program in falling markets. Depending on how the formula is written, an appraisal-based formula could put 100% of the market decline on the owner. Another advantage is that it ties the formula price to the condition of the home, at least to some extent, while preventing expensive improvements from pushing up the price. If a homeowner takes good care of their home, it will likely appraise higher than the neighboring house that suffered from deferred maintenance. Appraisal-based formulas remove some of the issues around repairs and improvements to the home, as the appraisal takes those into account. And since appraisals are conducted by a third party, the program is not in a position to make judgment calls regarding condition or capital improvement values. And although the formula is the most complicated of the three we've discussed, it's still relatively easy to calculate and administer. One of the most significant downsides of an appraisal-based formula is that it entails significant time and expense, and the formula price can be calculated only once a third-party appraisal is in hand. This is not only expensive, but can mean that a homeowner or the program must pay several $100s only to determine that they are not actually in a position to sell because their formula price is too low. Another disadvantage is that appraisals can be inconsistent and seem random. The same house that has two appraisals conducted at the same time by two appraisers may end up with wildly different values. During periods of rapid market appreciation, appraisal-based formulas can give an unduly high rate of return to owners and therefore compromise affordability. These formulas do not distinguish between improvements made by the homeowner and increases in market value attributed to market forces. So a home in very poor condition can appreciate significantly in hot markets, providing the seller of a home with a significant deferred maintenance with high returns. And some argue that the direct association between price and the housing market is a shortcoming. Rather than perceiving the formula as something the seller gets in addition to what they paid, for example, 25% of the increase in this case, people sometimes focus on what they're not getting, the other 75% of the market appreciation. Which formula should we use for our particular market? In order to evaluate which formula we should use, first we need to look at how we did in pricing our homes initially. Were we able to reach our ideal target market in our initial pricing? If so, we may be able to choose a more generous formula. Or did we end up compromising and pushing our price up? If that's the case, we would trend towards a more conservative formula. Next, we should consider where we are in the interest rate cycle. Right now we're at historic lows, so to buffer against this, we should consider a more conservative formula. And where is our economy in terms of wages, housing costs, and interest rates? Now we'll take a look at these different formulas from three different market perspectives. This is a graph of the three formulas we reviewed in a hot market. You can see the blue line, the appraisal-based formula, took a dive during the housing crash, but has jumped back up and has recovered considerably recently. But it's actually the AMI that proved the least affordable until the recession, after which the appraisal-based formula bounced back at a much faster rate than the AMI formula did. And this is an example of how those three formulas perform in a mixed market. In this instance, changes in market rate housing are substantial, but even more significant are changes in area median income over time. Here the AMI is the least affordable option, and the appraisal-based formula and the fixed-rate formula seem to track each other. And finally, this is an example of a down market. Here you'll notice that the scale is much smaller. Over the past 20 years, the fixed rate and the appraisal-based formulas tracked each other until the real estate market crash, which hit this community significantly. Wages were flat or slightly falling, so the AMI produces a falling price over this time frame. So as you can see, there's no one right answer for every community and every market, but you can find a formula that will perform well under most circumstances if you take the time to choose carefully up front.
This concludes the series on affordable pricing and resale formulas. These tools will enable you to help families own their own homes, build wealth, and create a stock of affordable housing in your community. Thanks again for joining me.